I've got freedom. So I could do anything I like. And it's actually made my life more difficult.
When was the last time I asked other people what they do?
They talk all the time about success. They don't really talk about happiness.
You may not love what you do, but don't stop liking what you do.
Enjoy and achieve. That's what success is in the end.
If there is one word that resonates most with young professionals today, it is the word hustle. You're told that you need to hustle to move ahead. But we're also seeing a lot of cases of burnout, fatigue, imposter syndrome, and many more. Today at Career Uninterrupted, we are going to explore this topic a little more. And I, Lochan, your host, is going to explore this topic along with Chris Croft. Chris is a writer, he's a keynote speaker, he's one of the top 10 speakers, and his videos are in top 10 on LinkedIn and Udemy. He has several books to his name, and he talks a lot about building careers that energizes you. Thank you, Chris, for being here and for agreeing to do this topic and this conversation with us.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question, I'm going to jump straight into this, is where does this burnout equal to success narrative come from? Like, has it always been like this? Are we seeing this a lot more? Because we do hear people constantly saying, I want to be successful, but I don't want that version of success, because that's what comes to mind immediately, that you're sacrificing everything and you're burnt out in the process. So where is this coming from?
Where does it come from? Well, I think the world is speeding up, probably because of technology. You can just get everything instantly on your phone now, watch videos, etc. So everything's really quick. You're not old enough, Lochan, to remember when you used to send a letter. I used to send letters to my...
I am old enough to remember that.
Yes.
I used to send
I would send letters to my girlfriend, and I would think, let's see, I posted it on Monday. She'll probably have got it on Wednesday. I might get a reply on Friday. And then if it didn't come, I'd be thinking, maybe on Saturday. And so, whereas now, email. And I remember when somebody first sent me an email and expected a reply the same day. And I remember thinking, well, that's a bit pushy. Whereas now, people expect a reply, in less than an hour. Well, I've emailed. Why hasn't he replied? And we have direct messaging, WhatsApp and things, and we expect to get replies pretty much straight away, don't we? So I think technology has made the world speed up. And it's also made us multitask. So quite often, you're on your laptop, you've got your phone as well, you're maybe watching TV, you're talking to somebody. And so there's a general sort of just hustly, speeding up feeling to life because of tech. But the other thing, certainly here in England, is we blame it on the Americans because, we know that the Italians have a nice 2-hour lunchtime and the Spanish have a little siesta after lunch or whatever, or we think anyway. I don't know if it's true. Whereas we work, in England, we work the longest hours in Europe. And we're one of the least productive as well, by the way. So we achieve the same amount, but in longer hours.
Right.
And it's because in England, we're sort of half American and half European, really. And the Americans have almost no holidays. They work really long hours. They just work. And in America, it's absolutely fine to interrupt people in the evening and to phone them up at weekends and things. In England, it's sort of, we don't know whether it's okay. I think in somewhere like France, they probably just don't answer the phone. I don't know. So I think there might be a sort of a country thing going on. And India, whenever I've been there, which has been a few times, as you know, I love India.
Yeah.
It's pretty hectic. I mean, I know it's not all the same as Mumbai, for example, but the Indians have a real pace of life. And so I think, as soon as technology in America came along and said, let's do things quickly, India was like, yeah, okay, then we can do that. And they were very quick to just adopt it, like sort of almost, corrupting an impressionable child. Suddenly, India was like a young growing nation in the world of commerce. And suddenly it's just really embraced it. And I'm not sure if it's a good thing, really, but I don't know. That's my theory of what's happened based on no facts whatsoever. So I do think there's something in the Indian personality of loving to be busy and having lots of deals on the go and juggling and, which I think we don't have so much here. So I think it's probably personality plus tech plus culture from America. And yeah.
And
And so now everything is speeding up, possibly not in a good way, though. That's what I think.
Of course, we do look up to the West a lot more. And,
Yeah, you shouldn't, but you do.
Yeah, we shouldn't, but we do. So we of course have those situations. And therefore, there is also this mindset that there is a definition of success and you need to kind of achieve it. And that definition of the way to achieve that success has, like you said, has been probably driven by the constant being connected or being available all the time, taking no holidays, etc., has been defined as the path to achieve that success. So we are effectively just emulating that very quietly and saying, yeah, maybe that's what kind of makes sense to us as well.
Yeah. Can I add something else I just thought of, actually, which is also that if you read a lot of American success books, because most of the big success gurus like Tony Robbins and people like that, they're all American.
Right.
They talk all the time about success. They don't really talk about happiness.
Yeah.
And they sort of assume that if you're successful and if you can 10x your business and, have multi-million income, that will somehow make you happy.
Make you happy.
And so I think they're probably missing out on half the equation. And I personally think success is to achieve and enjoy. And I think, the American way of thinking about it is only about achieve. And most of the stuff on LinkedIn, for example, is all about achieve.
Right.
And there is a little parallel world of people writing books now on happiness, on the enjoyment side of things. And of course, you can get happiness from achieving things.
Yeah.
You can't only go for hedonism and only go for enjoyment. So you want to get a mixture of enjoying the process, but also getting a feeling of achievement. And I think a lot of people have forgotten half of the equation and they're just obsessed with achieving, which I think is a real mistake.
That's interesting because I know you talk a lot around happiness and, you've also kind of explored that deeply as well. So when did this piece, and if I can go back, maybe I have to go back like about 100 years or thereabouts, where it somewhere was considered like hard work was always appreciated. But it almost is like hard work needs to be felt like it's hard, right? Like a lot of people have legitimized it, saying that it's okay, you don't enjoy your work. Yes, it's a lot of work. You're not finding it exciting, etc., etc. But that's what hard work is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be, like the word itself carries it. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be difficult.
Hard and work.
Right. You're supposed to be hard at work. What's your experience with that? And how did that come about? And why is it still ease still viewed with suspicion at workplaces? Yeah.
I think before the Industrial Revolution, if you want to go way back, we weren't given a job by a boss. We just were. You were a farmer or a blacksmith or whatever, or you were, making pottery, you were a potter or whatever. Right. And I think then it didn't feel like work because it was what you are. So the farmer is milking his or her cows first very early in the morning. But they don't mind it because the cows want to be milked and you want the milk and you're at one with nature and it's kind of what you are and what you do. And it's not a problem. And then I think when the Industrial Revolution came along, everybody was suddenly in factories with a horrible boss making them work hard doing. And often they were doing like one tiny part of a production line. It was very repetitive and very boring and maybe dangerous and hot and everything else. And so work became suddenly this thing you had to do. And people were making sure you didn't sneak away and skive. They were making sure you worked. And ever since then, we've had that sort of philosophy of you have to go to work to get paid, but you kind of want to do the minimum. Your boss wants you to do the maximum.
Yeah.
And I think it feels really different. And so, but there are a few people who don't fit into that, like me and you, actually, because if you're self-employed, say doing training courses and making videos, which is what I do, I feel more like that blacksmith who's just making his own thing.
Right.
And it's not a physical thing like a blacksmith would make, so I'm making things and it's just me. And so it doesn't feel like work to me because I don't have a boss saying there's a budget and you've got to make 20 by next week. Yeah. So because I've sort of got ownership of it, it doesn't feel like work. And I'm always saying to people, if you can find a job you love, it won't feel like work. And you will work hard. In fact, if you find a job if you find a job you love, you'll probably work harder than other people because you love it.
Right.
So, when my wife's away for a few days, I think, great, I can go and record loads of things and I can write loads of books. And I don't just put my feet up and do nothing. I work when she's away because I really enjoy the work if I get a chunk of uninterrupted time. So I almost want to work. And I think you do need to work hard to get happiness, actually, because you want to have a feeling of putting your time into something worthwhile and getting results. But it has to be something you love. There are people who do jobs for other people that they love. Like a friend of mine is an engineer and he designs things for a big company and he loves it. He just loves his designing and they leave him to sort of get on with it, really. And so he's happy. So I think the search must go on for a job that you love, because then you can work hard and enjoy it. If you're doing a job you don't really enjoy, if you either hate it or you're just neutral about it, then you won't be happy when you have to work hard, because you'll be thinking, I would rather have this time at home. I'd rather not be here. I'd rather not be doing this. I've always thought when you're at work, you might as well work as hard as you can, by the way. You might as well, if you're there, because you want to go home at the end of your day proud of what you've done. But the problem is when the hours get longer and it starts to eat into your personal life, because then you start to resent the fact that, work is stealing your personal life. And of course, companies often think if they can get people to work harder, they'll get more out of them and make more money, which is not always true, actually.
That's true.
And so then it makes people unhappy. So I think self-employed is very different to employed, and finding a job you love is completely different to just doing a job for the money. And I think most people just do a job for the money, and most people are employed.
Right.
So, so I think, thinking as I go along, I think probably the way out of it is either to find a job you love or to be self-employed, or both, if you can do that.
If you could do that.
Yeah.
So just a thought there, because a lot of people may not have I would say, either the opportunity or the means to necessarily do something that they love, right? So either because...
Oh, well, I don't agree with that, you see.
Okay, so I would love to hear that view.
Well, I can't prove it, but I think that anyone can find a job they love if they look. I mean, it took me years. It took me about 30 years to find the right thing for me, So although I was quite lucky, well-educated, my parents had a reasonable amount of money, and I was very lucky in my life, really. I still wasted lots of time as an engineer being not a very good one, and a manager not being a very good one, and eventually discovered being a university lecturer, which I really liked, but the money was not very good, and eventually ended up as a freelance trainer. And I wish I'd found that sooner. So I think the search must go on. And I think anybody can find something that they love, but you just have to keep looking. And I don't think there's a magic way to find it. I think it's trial and error. I've tried looking there are computer programs where you answer questions and it tells you your ideal job.
Yeah.
And mine told me to join the army.
Okay.
Which, if you know me, you would know that would be the worst ever job for me. Because for a start, I'm very bad at discipline. I think I don't do what I'm told. I'm untidy. I'm organized, but I don't do what other people tell me. And if somebody told me to do something where I would probably get killed, I would just say no. So I'd be terrible in the army, having to march around the square and things. So I think it's very difficult to think of what all the questions would be to then put you into the perfect job. In fact, there's no list even of all the jobs, because jobs keep proliferating all the time. Now AI's come. There's jobs like AI consultant and advisor and things, and that's all just appeared like this year. So I think there's no mechanical way to find your ideal job, but I do think that you must keep looking and just trying things, and maybe take a risk. Rather than saying, well, I've got quite a badly paid job, which I hate, but I can't let it go. Or even I've got a well-paid job that I hate, but I can't let it go because I have to pay for my house. I think start a side hustle at least, experiment with a bit, or go and at least see what other people do in their jobs and see if there might be something you could do. And retrain if you have to. You can't retrain to be a doctor. That's too much training. Yeah. But most jobs, you could learn to be an app developer, let's say. You could just teach yourself how to do that in your spare time. You could do that. Or a trainer, like I am, you could learn to do that. It doesn't take long. You could do it. So I actually think the search must go on for the perfect job. And I don't agree with people who go, well, I've got to pay the mortgage and I only know, I remember thinking, I only know about management. How can I escape from being a manager? And I'd never really thought about training, but so there will be a job out there that people can do that will make them happy, but they've got to find it. And that's the hard thing, I think.
Understood. So the part that you're kind of bringing out again, and I think even in my book, we talk about it a little more, is to say that, you may not love what you do, but don't stop liking what you do, right? So you can't be in a space which you hate.
Yes.
Just because it's paying you, because sooner or later you're going to walk out of it, either fully burnt out or just completely, dead inside. So you might just not be in a space to do anything else. So how do you also look at building something on the side or picking up something that you might like and see how that goes about and try a few things and see which one works for you, and eventually look at getting into or doing something that you absolutely love. And I like the part that you said that it took you 30 years to get there.
Yeah.
If effort and visibility were, let's say, not a measure of success, because I was reading somewhere recently that a recruiter got a particular profile and actually did not take the candidature ahead because that candidate was not present on LinkedIn, and said, okay, so if you do not have a LinkedIn presence, we are not going to take this ahead. So in today's day and age, visibility is kind of being equated to being present on social media, finding different places, etc. So if I were to just say, if success were not measured in this lens, what should success look like? Or what would it look like if it was measured as purely as efforts or purely as visibility?
Yes.
What has been your definition of it?
By the way, before I answer the success question, visibility on LinkedIn is really interesting, isn't it? Because why should you be measured just by, you're not on Instagram or you're not on Facebook?
I know.
Although I don't entirely trust people who are not on LinkedIn, if you're not there at all, because I sort of think, what are you hiding? I don't know. I mean, because LinkedIn has become so all-pervasive that, if you're not on there, I do wonder, or if you're on there without a photo, it just seems a bit, or if you've got 3 connections, you sort of think, well, what are you doing? But I suppose it depends on what their job is. But if they're, in sales or something, you just think, how can you be not on LinkedIn? Because whenever you meet anybody, you quite often have a quick look on LinkedIn just to see, what their exact job description is and how long they've been with that company or where were they before. So I would urge everybody to get on LinkedIn. And it is free after all.
Yeah.
Plus you can follow me and I'm posting all the time. And I do, I am a bit suspicious of people who aren't on LinkedIn, who claim to be, sort of commercially minded and, good networkers and stuff, and they're not even on LinkedIn. But if you say a goat farmer in Rajasthan, you don't have to be on LinkedIn, do you? So I suppose it depends a bit. What is success for someone on LinkedIn or a goat farmer in Rajasthan? I think success is probably, the ultimate success is freedom to do what you want, isn't it? That's the objective. To have enough money and time to do what you want. Although, funnily enough, I have recently got to a point where, because I've made all these courses that are on LinkedIn Learning and on Udemy, I get paid per view. And I only get a tiny amount per view, but I get lots of views. And I can pretty much live off the money from those. I don't know how long it will last, but at the moment, I can live off the money. And so I've got freedom. So I could do anything I like. And it's actually made my life more difficult because I actually don't know what to do with that freedom. I'm thinking, but what should I do with this? I've got a load of time. I've got nothing next week. I could do anything. But what will I do? And it just raises more questions. It's almost quite good if you've got a structured world where, you have to see customers and you have to keep a boss happy or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but until I got to this point, I've always said that freedom's the objective. But freedom to do what? And what you end up doing, of course, when you've got freedom is you fill your time with more things, like maybe charity or whatever, and you end up just as busy as you were before. So I think success isn't an empty diary. I think success is spending your time on what you love or what you choose to do, maybe. It's not an empty diary, though. It's spending your time on what you choose to do and getting a feeling of enjoyment and achievement from whatever you're doing. And I think it has to be enjoyment and achievement. I think achievement on its own is not fun. And enjoyment on its own just doesn't feel satisfying.
Satisfactory. So I
Yeah,
like
so
that
I think
combination
that's
and that
what it is.
equation that you brought in, saying it has to be a combination of achievement and enjoyment. Is there a percentage mix you're going to give it to the two?
I think it depends a bit on personality, actually, because I think some people are quite enjoyment orientated, but they need to make sure there's a little bit of achievement in there. And I think if you're achievement orientated, you want to make sure that at least you enjoy doing some of it. So I think it can be 80-20 or it can be 20-80. I don't think it matters as long as it doesn't go down to 10 or 0. That's my guess. But I'm much more obsessed with achieving than enjoying. I'm not very good at enjoying myself, actually. I love just doing stuff. And so, for example, I've had my grandchildren visiting for a few days here, and they're 2 little girls. They're really cute. And we've been, feeding the tortoise and cooking and doing all. It's been great.
So cute.
But I've got this nagging feeling that I haven't achieved anything. And what am I achieving? And then part of my mind says, but it's okay because it's just fun, isn't it? Just to put up a tent in the garden and go in the tent or whatever. But my brain wants to make a list of everything we've done and make a little book or a PDF that I could put on LinkedIn of ways to play with 4-year-old grandchildren, publish it. So my achieve brain is sort of always working. And I think, I find it difficult to do nearly all enjoy. I'm more obsessed with achieve. But I think that's probably because of how my life has been. Been shaped like that. I guess we should aim for 50-50, shouldn't we? But I don't think we should worry about whether it's 40-60 or 30-70.
As long
as you've got a bit of each, I think you'll probably be fine.
So my question, since you said that for you, enjoyment is a little challenge, you find it tough to kind of put your feet up and say, okay, that's it. There's nothing necessarily coming out of this. Then what does intentional laziness mean? How do you drive that, or how do you use that?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Laziness. Firstly, I don't know whether you've read The Road Less Traveled.
I have.
By Scott Peck. I love that book. And he says in there that laziness is the cause of every problem in the end, which that's quite a big thing to say. Yeah. But ever since I read that book, I've been fascinated by the idea of laziness. And I know that lots of people are not very happy. And when you ask them why, they say, oh, well, because, I don't really like my job. And you go, well, why don't you do something else? Well, it's too difficult to retrain. And you think, well, that's laziness. And there's a story about a guy who visits a friend, and his friend's got this great big dog that's lying on the floor. And every now and then the dog sort of whimpers. He goes, ooh, ooh. And he says, what's wrong with your dog? And the bloke says, well, he's lying on a nail. There's a little nail sticking up from the floorboard, and the dog's just on this nail and it's poking him in. And he says, why doesn't the dog move? And he says, well, it doesn't hurt enough. And I think that is a lot of us, your job's not that bad, or, you're not that unhappy, and you sort of live with it. So laziness is giving that dog pain, really. And I think, we all suffer from that to an extent. But laziness is also efficiency. And so trying to find, ways to do something with the least effort is what leads to more efficient systems and things.
And innovation. A lot of people say lazy people are innovative because they're finding quicker ways to get things done.
And so I've been thinking recently about wanting to be nicely busy and not too busy. And I came up with a little theory just the other day, which I want to draw you on my whiteboard here. Can I do that? I've got a visual aid here.
Yes.
And because this whiteboard's already got stuff on it. So what I think is people think that work should be like this. So the amount of work's going up and down, but it's averaging pretty much, that's your maximum. That's 100% there.
Right.
So some days you're obviously too busy. So some days you're not coping. And we've all had days where our list just gets longer and longer, haven't we?
Yeah.
And then other days where, you then come up for air, as we say, and you can catch up a bit. So this work here has to be pushed into this next space when we get some time. And then here we're too busy, but we can do it here. And so we just about stagger through our working lives just about keeping up. But the problem with that is it's really stressful when you're too busy and you're giving a bad service to other people because they have to wait till here before you can do it.
Yeah.
And you don't even know when the next space is going to be. You can't even promise when you're going to do something because you might be equally busy tomorrow and the day after, and you might not get a space till here, you know. So I think that's a horrible way to live. And by the way, there are some people who are like this. So in other words, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Now, and actually, I think a lot of people who think this is too busy. Some people think they're here when actually they're just here. So they are coping. They are, you know, on average, they're coping.
Yeah.
It just fluctuates a lot. Whereas these people are literally not coping.
Yeah.
And they, you know, they're going under. There's a whole load of stuff they haven't done. And that really is a problem. And what they do is they work longer and longer hours, but it doesn't help because all you do is get more tired and you end up just achieving the same amount. And so this is where your boss really has overloaded you, right? And what you do when this happens is that you drop the least important, well, hopefully you drop the least important things.
Yeah.
But a whole load of things just don't get done.
And I think one of the things that does get impacted would be your health. That's the first thing, because you'd suddenly
Well,
be like,
yes.
can I
It's
cut
so
short
stressful.
on the run, or can I cut short on that workout, or
Yes.
can I just order in because it'll save me 30 minutes of cooking time, or, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the answer is what I would call nicely busy, which is to be sort of like this. So, you know, maybe you're averaging about, let's say, 80% of your capacity. And very occasionally you get a peak and you can't do it all in a day. But you really want to be able to cope with the peaks. And so to be able to cope with the peaks, I think you have to be at about 80%. And then this extra space you've got here. So most days you get a bit of extra time, maybe between 10 and 20% of extra time. That's only an hour a day or half an hour a day. But that extra headroom, if you like, can allow you to be creative. I'm going to put that away now. And that's where your creativity comes from. And in fact, somebody said to me once, you can't be creative if you've got half-finished things in your mind.
Yes.
Because your mind is fretting about those. Oh, I need to do that. I haven't phoned him back. So to be really creative, you have to finish stuff and clear your mind and have space for new ideas to sort of pop into, as it were. You have to have that space. So I think ideally we'd be averaging 80%. And that means saying no to some stuff, getting rid of some stuff, you know, being efficient, maybe being good at delegating, all that time management stuff.
Yeah.
So that we can then be just nicely busy. You don't want to be bored down at 50%, but you want to be in control and have a bit of space. And you can use that space to think of new things. You can also use it to have fun, I suppose, couldn't you? You know, do things that you like doing that maybe don't achieve anything. You could also use that space to improve the way you work and to get further on top of things. So rather than being too busy to ever improve your systems, you can have some space to improve your systems. So, you know, whenever you get a problem, you can think, why did that problem happen? And, you know, let's get to the bottom of that and fix it forever. But that takes a bit of time.
Yes.
And some people never have any time to get ahead of the game. So I think being nicely busy is being at 80%. But of course, you know, bosses don't like that because they say, why aren't you running around on fire? Why aren't you on the phone and doing this and late to meetings because you're so busy and your desk is full? That's what bosses, stupidly, that's what they want to see. They don't want to see someone just thinking, you know, because that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But actually it is good. So that's what I think the aim is, to be nicely busy at 80. Not at 100, and definitely not at 120, where it's just spiraling out of control. But the trouble is, bosses judge us by whether we look busy. They also judge us by our working hours. So, you know, if we stay on late, they think, oh yeah, you know, she's keen, she's doing a good job. And what they should be saying is, she's staying late because she's not really coping. She's obviously not very organized. But they don't. You know, they love to see us working long hours. There was one job I used to work, and the boss used to stay really late and kind of expected other people to be late. And I used to leave my jacket on my chair so that he thought I was still around somewhere when I wasn't. And I also made sure I used to work in several different places. I used to move around so that he was never really sure if I was there or not.
Yeah.
You know, so you play these
I think
games.
we've all done this.
Yeah, park your car in
sure,
different
that's-
places so they don't know whether you're still there or not, you know. So I've got a tortoise who lives in my garden, and he sleeps in different, he's got a little house, but quite often he sleeps out of the house. So you never really know where he is. He's not predictable, you know, and if he's escaped from the garden, you don't know. Because if he's not in his house, he could be sleeping somewhere else. And I think I was like him. I used to keep moving, so my boss couldn't really quite know whether I'd escaped and gone home or not.
Interesting. Like you said, the fact that people like you when you're busy. And I remember very early, I was in a different city, and I used to live in a house, the upper floor is where I used to stay, and ground floor was this uncle, a relative who would be there. So on and off, I would bump into him, or a couple of times he would call me in for a drink or a meal or something. And I remember once I told him, I said, I come back from work very late. I come back 8 p.m. or something. And I told him I'd leave fairly early. And he said, if you're working these long hours, you're very inefficient. And he started very I think he was the only person who said that to me, because till then everybody's like, wow, you're working so long hours, and you're working hard, and you're so busy, and you might be doing so much. And he just said, you're inefficient. And I was taken aback. I said, why would you say that? He said, because you should finish your work in time. So he said,
very rare that bosses say that, isn't it?
And very rarely bosses say that. So it's just a very, very weird space. So and I think one of the drawbacks, or carrying that concept forward, is when you're self-employed, there is nobody who's expecting you to be operating at 120, right? It's you yourself who's giving that benchmark of saying, where am I operating? So why does, even as someone who's self-employed, or someone who's on their own, or someone who can choose, or they're not with bosses who are pushing them over, still something that you're choosing to do less, or you're choosing to operate at less than 100%, always feel like a big career risk? If you do that, you'll probably not grow, right?
Well,
and when all you said, it's a great space, because if you do that, you can think clearly, you can be more creative, you can be innovative, you can solve problems more deeply that do band-aid fixes.
Yes.
But why does that still feel like a big career risk?
Well, I think when you're self-employed, you always worry you're going to run out of work, don't you? So you always do. Even now, if I look in my diary for 6 months' time, there's nothing. But things will come in, and they always have, and they probably will, but you never really know. So I think it's really easy to worry about that. Also, it's really easy to commit your future self to lots of work. So if somebody wants me to do a training course on a difficult subject for not very much money in a place that's a long way away, if it's tomorrow, I don't want to do it. But if it's next year, I'll probably say yes and put it in my diary. And then when that day comes, I think, why did I agree to this?
Yeah.
So because of the time lag, I do think it's really easy to overwork yourself. And then I suppose maybe we've got a bit of guilt built into us as well, if we feel guilty if we're not working really hard. I mean, I don't really suffer much from guilt, but I know lots of other people do. I suffer probably more from fear of running out of work. And also, I'm not very good at saying no. When I'm offered work that's not very good, I still say, oh, go on then. And I need to it's hard to say no. And I don't know whether that's people pleasing, or whether it's greed for the money, or fear of not getting money. But it is hard to say no when you're self-employed. I think if you're employed, I think what happens is they measure you by hours worked. They measure you by activity. Do you look busy and do you work long hours? Because it's quite difficult to measure output. Now, something like salespeople, you can easily measure because you can just look at how much they've sold.
That's true.
But some other people, like, designers or people like that, how do you know what they've done? You might look at a web designer and all they've done today is change the color of a website. But maybe it was really hard to do, or maybe it took lots of thinking, or, so you just don't know really. And even if you know all about websites, you don't know whether that particular one was a difficult decision or whatever. So in the end, I think as a manager, it's really hard to measure other people's work. But of course, if it's just you and you're self-employed, you know whether you've done a lot of work or whether you've achieved a lot. So if you're looking at output, bosses don't know what your output is, but you know what your own output is. You know whether you've created a really good design for a training course today or not, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think it partly comes from the difficulty of measuring. And then possibly a bit of guilt. I mean, do you suffer from guilt?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, it took me a lot of time to be okay taking a vacation. be okay taking time off.
Yeah.
And I remember my team used to tell me, which they sometimes still do, they sometimes laugh and say, it's better that you're not on a vacation, because when you're there, you're checking up on us a lot more. Because suddenly I feel like I'm not there, I need to get some work done. And they'll be like, that's when all the emails will start coming in and, you're responding faster and so on. But so you'd rather be here than be on a vacation.
What I do with vacations, by the way, is I kind of blur the edges a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I go on holiday somewhere, but I do a bit of work while I'm there. Like I might do a podcast, or I might, do a bit of designing of a training course that I'm thinking about. Because if I'm thinking about work when I'm on holiday, am I working? I mean, I don't even know if that counts as work, really. And obviously, if I do, let's say I was doing this podcast and I had the beach outside, then I guess you would say it's work. But is this podcast, I don't even know if this counts as work. It's fun talking to you. And so what I do is I go on holiday, but I do some work from there. And I have to, because if you're self-employed, you have to keep an eye on your own emails and things, don't you?
Yes.
But then I go on more holidays than I used to.
That's true.
So, I might say maybe take 10 weeks off a year, but during those 10 weeks, I'm working some of the time. And I think that's better for my customers, but I also think it's better for my state of mind, because I don't have to think, no, I mustn't think about work. And then now I'm at home, I must work all the time. I quite like to be partly on holiday all the time, if you see what I mean.
I like that thought process now that you say that, because that's one of the things that I think that's one of the things I used to struggle with, because when you're employed with somebody, when you're not available, you can simply say, this is not my problem for this 1 week. I am not available. Someone else will handle this in my absence. And therefore, you're also expected that when you're back, you're not taking time off, or you're not taking a half day, or you're not just kind of saying, okay, I want to leave a bit early because I want to watch a football game. So you're expected not to be doing that. But when you're self-employed, I can kind of do both. So I can choose to work on a weekend because, there is work to be done, and I like that, and something else. And there could be some days when I say, okay, you know what, I'm going to shut down early today because I want to cook something.
Yeah.
So, or I just want to sit down and watch a great game, or
maybe you don't feel very creative, and there's kind of no point in working, so you might as well go and cook something.
That's true.
Whereas if you suddenly feel creative, my best time is in the evening for some reason. So if I was like counting the hours, I would think, no, I'm not going to work this evening because they're not paying me, and why should I? So what I should do is be creative in the evening when the idea is there.
Yes.
And then maybe tomorrow go home earlier and watch a football game, and there should be flexibility. And so some companies have flexi hours where they actually count how many hours, but that's very petty. And then you think, no, I've got one more hour, I've got to work, so I've got to sit here.
Yeah.
And I think it shouldn't be about the actual hours. It should just be, when you're feeling good, you should work, and when you don't want to feel in the mood, then you don't have to. And I think it should just be a more grown-up way of doing it, in a way. In the overall, you do the job. And overall, you get the results and your boss is happy. And how you do it, whether you do it at night or whether you do it in less hours because that's how you are, or, whether you have a big long lunch hour, I think should be up to you mainly. I mean, obviously, somebody's got to answer the phone when customers ring. You have to have coverage and things like that. Within that, I think people vary, and we should try to be flexible if we can. I think increasingly we're going to go that way. But of course, you've got working from home, haven't you? Which is, it caused a lot of chaos. And I'd like to know what's happening in India. In England, most companies are trying to pull people back into the office now. But a few companies are saying, no, we're going to let you carry on working from home. And so the best people want to work for those companies.
Yeah.
Is that what's happening in India as well?
That's also what's happening in India.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of so there are companies which are 5 days work from office. And then there are a few companies which have said, okay, a couple of days you come to work, come to office, couple of days you work from home. And the days that you come to office, we will overlap so that the entire team is there. So you get to meet them, whatever in-person conversations you want to have, the water cooler conversations you want to have, all of that you can have with them. And then you still have the flexibility.
Which works really well.
which I think works very well.
I think I'm definitely in favor of doing 2 or 3 days in the office and 2 or 3 days at home.
Yeah.
And I know there's this argument that when they're at home, you don't know what they're doing, but then you should measure them by results, not activity.
So
And you'll know who's good and who isn't, you know?
That's true. So if I actually think that, what's happened over the years is this measurement system. So if you go to pre-industrial time, the measurement was, a fruit will fruit when it has to fruit, right? So I can't be like standing on the, on the head of the tree and just say, hey, you now need to like bear a fruit, right? So
Yes.
It'll flower, it'll fruit when it does. But I have to do all the things needed to get there, right? I have to sow the seed on time. I have to water it. I have to, ensure that there are no insects.
That's a good way of thinking.
I have to keep doing things, but I can't force the results. And there will be times when I'll get 100. There'll be times when I'll get 1,000. Well, I'll probably get 50. If the weather wasn't great or whatever. I think when we moved to the Industrial Revolution, it was easy to predict the outcome. So you could say that if each person takes 10 minutes to make a bulb, and therefore, in a day, the person can produce 100 bulbs. And therefore, if I put like 10 people on, they've done that bit of math. But that still works in a manufacturing lens where you're producing a product, something you can touch and feel. But over the last 50 years, we've also moved heavily into services space. And a lot of organizations today are providing services. They don't necessarily are providing products. But the measurement mechanism is still the same. The measurement is how many hours you're spending, because it was like 8 hours equal to whatever, X number of hours at work equal to, 100 bulbs. So X amount of work means like 10 contracts. It doesn't work like that, right?
No, if your service is, say, cleaning windows, you can measure how many windows you clean, because that's just like a factory, really. Or if you're making beds in a hotel. But you're right. But as soon as you get a service where you're doing, let's say, consultancy or something like that, you can't measure it. And I think creativity is what has made it difficult to measure. So because there's no creativity, I don't think, in cleaning windows or making beds in a hotel. But as soon as you get creativity in a job, then you don't know how long did it take to design that website? You don't know.
Yeah.
And also you need a bit of spare time, like I was drawing on my board, to have that space to be creative. And so you've got physical work and then you've got mental work. And mental work is much harder to measure and much more of a fragile thing.
Yeah.
So physical work, you could just work harder and do more. But mental work, if you work harder, you don't necessarily get better results. And so I think you're right. I think it's because we now are in the information age. It's all about, the knowledge economy, isn't it? And that is really difficult to measure. And I think if you're hustling, you can do routine things quickly, but you're not going to do the brilliant bit at the very, at the top. Just take, for example, music. If you're making boring music for lifts, you could probably hurry up and make 20 in a day or something like that. But you couldn't say to Bruce Springsteen, hurry up, I need 3 great songs by the end of the week or something, And you couldn't even say to him, why have you only made 1 song this month? Because he just might not have been in the mood. Or maybe a song he makes has taken him actually several years of thinking about it. And suddenly it just pops into his mind, almost fully formed. But it's come from years of, suffering or experiences or whatever. And suddenly the song appears. So I think creativity is something that needs a bit of space. And as the world speeds up and everybody's hustling, you're not going to get... And even AI, it's creative. You can say, write me a country and western song about... In fact, I've made a curry song, which you can look at on YouTube if you just look for taste buds dancing on my tongue. Okay. I said I wanted a dance record about curry. Okay. And this AI program called Suno, S-U-N-O, made a really quite good song. And I put a video on it of me when I was in Mumbai and things. I think it's good. But the point is, it's not Bruce Springsteen or Bob Dylan.
Right.
And so if you say to AI, write me a 5-minute dance song about curry, it'll do that and it'll be pretty good. But if you want really creative brilliance, it can't do that because you can't mechanize it. That little spark, which is quite fragile, can't be mechanized and it can't be measured and it can't be rushed, And the idea the way I like to explain AI is you can tell it to write a symphony, it will, but you've got to have the idea of a symphony. You've got to say, why don't I make something really long and I'll have 4 movements, I'll have a slow movement or whatever. Do they have 4? I'm not sure. But anyway, but you have to have the idea of what you then ask it to do. And that idea will just pop into your mind when you give it a bit of space. But there has to be space for creativity, I think. And by the way, I think creativity is the one thing that managers bring or should bring. So what's the point of a manager? And I don't think it's just to make sure people work or tell them to work harder. I mean, you can do that, but that's not really what I think what managers are for. They are there to improve things, not just to keep it running, but to improve it. So their job is to have ideas about how to improve things. Why don't we combine those two? And why don't we do that in a different way? Get them to do that. Why don't we? So, it's managers' ideas. The role of managers is to change things in order to improve them. So it's basically creativity. And I would say to a manager, anything that's not creative is a waste of you.
Right.
So, and you have to do some things that are not creative. You have to fill in the timesheet at the end of the week or whatever. But the objective really is to mechanize everything that's not creative or delegated or something so that you can get maximum time for creativity. But to be creative, you have to have some headspace. You have to have 20% spare to have that time to be creative and also the energy to be creative.
So then I want to ask you this. What's that one thing that you think people should give themselves permission to do more of, right? So that they can work sustainably. Like, I think one of the things that has shifted for me is certain things are sacrosanct. Like in a day, I will try and eat my lunch very peacefully.
Yes.
Irrespective. And of course, there are certain days if I'm traveling and I'm transit and all of that. But I genuinely despise those days because it just makes me feel sick. So my meals, I make sure that, I'm sitting down and I'm, eating. I'm either listening to something or something like that. But earlier I would be working and eating, or I would be in a meeting and I would be eating. So that's something I think I've given myself more permission to do because that allows me to calm down. That allows me to, give that little bit of headspace. And yes, there are thoughts running in your head. Maybe you just got off a very important meeting and those, you're allowing yourself to
you're thinking while you're eating, aren't you?
You're allowing yourself to sit with those thoughts. But what's the one thing that you feel, people need to give themselves?
Well,
more
can permission? I have 2 things?
Yeah, of course.
I think one is sleep, actually, because the thing is it's our mind that matters, but unfortunately we have a body as well. And we have to look after the body so the mind can be good. I think eating, as you say, eating's important, eating and sleeping. And people often say to me, how do you have so much energy? How do you do so many things? And I think it's because I get quite a lot of sleep. So I'm wide awake in the evening. I don't go to bed till midnight, but I don't get up till about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I never do anything before 10 o'clock in the morning if I can avoid it. But I've worked out over the years, that's the best way for me. Some people like to get up early, that's fine. But I think it's quite hard to get enough sleep because you don't want the day to end because you're doing things and to give yourself permission to go to bed a bit earlier and to say, no, I am going to go to bed earlier because sleep's not wasted time. And so, if you have to get up early, reasonably early, then you must go to bed earlier.
Yeah.
And even if that means you have less time in the evening to do what you want, because I think sleep's really important. And I've noticed when I do training courses, sometimes there'll be somebody falling asleep. And I know it's not me because everybody else is really interested. It's just this one person. And it could be me, but maybe they've got a little baby or something like that. But for whatever the reason, they're not getting enough sleep. And imagine going through your whole life tired because when you're tired, your creativity is the first thing to go. You can't, you just plod through the routine things. You don't enjoy them. You do them badly. You're bad-tempered. Everything is worse when you're tired. And so I do think sleep's really important. It's a bit of a boring one, but I think the other thing we should give ourselves permission to do is to keep looking for the thing that you love, which we mentioned earlier. I think, and not just think, well, this is my life now. This is the job I do and it's not great, but it'll have to do. No, spend a little bit of time just thinking and looking and asking other people what they do, looking at what other people do, thinking, could I do this? And, almost give yourself permission to dream or to imagine or to question, at least to question. If it's not good enough at the moment, then could it be better? Because I absolutely think it can for anybody. And I think a lot of people have just never been told that. You almost want to go to somebody who is, maybe you're buying food in a supermarket and they're just putting all your food through the scanner and they look totally bored. And you want to say to them, do you love your job? Because they may do, which is great, but they may go, no, I hate it, it's boring. And then you could say to them, you could do something different if you wanted. And they'll go, could I? And you're like, yes, you could. And I think a lot of people have never been told that. I've tried to tell my children, you can do anything you want to do. Yeah. And there are limits, like you can't be a basketball player unless you're 6'8" or whatever. Yeah. And you probably can't be an astronaut unless you're incredibly clever. And some of us are just I'm not clever enough to do that. But leaving aside a few things like that, pretty much every other job in the world you could do if you wanted. And I think just give yourself permission to believe that I think that's what I would say. And get enough sleep.
Yeah. I would still say maybe you can be an astronaut. It'll take you time, but are you willing to spend that? Maybe, are you willing to spend that time? There's this one TV show called The Rookie where, Nathan Fillion decides to come and become a cop when he's in his 40s because he's just reinventing his life.
You could certainly become a policeman if you wanted.
If you want. So I found that as an interesting concept because we do talk about, careers, second careers, a lot of those.
I mean, the other thing is that a lot of people think if they could be an astronaut, they would be happy. And, firstly, if you think, if I could do that, I would be happy, you've got to ask yourself why you're thinking that. Because wherever you go, there you are. So when you're the astronaut, you're still you, and you've still got all your issues just because you're an astronaut now. And actually, are astronauts happier? Because it's a pretty tough job. It's dangerous, hard work, lots of training, and a lot of them never even get into space in the end and all that. So I think I would definitely not assume, like, for example, most people think doctors is a brilliant job. And a lot of the doctors I've spoken to have said that actually they're quite disappointed by it. It hasn't made them happy. And vets is another one. Vets have a very high suicide rate, and most vets are really unhappy, veterinary surgeons. And so I would definitely ask a few people, what's it like? Do you enjoy it? Is it like you dreamed it would be? And really check it out before you commit to doing something different. Because I think, sometimes we just think, if I could do that job, I'd be happy. Yeah. And you do want to really make sure before you commit and do it. But it's easy to find out because they'll be happy to tell you you could ask about the pros and the cons. What's the downside of the job, and then see what they say. Because, not always, and that's good because maybe a job like an astronaut that's really hard to get wouldn't actually make you happy anyway. So you can let go of that and you can start looking for things that are easier to do that actually probably would make you happy.
Would make you happy, that's true. Yeah. And you brought out a very interesting piece and I'm actually asking myself this question: when was the last time I asked other people what they do? Of course, if someone tells me I'm technical program manager in whatever XYZ company.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, okay. But I'm asking myself this question as well, saying, when was the last time I paused and said, okay, so what does that mean? What do you do every day? What does your work entail? What are the things you like about your job? What are the things so even just the simple curiosity of what else is out there, and therefore, what more can I do, itself is liberating. Suddenly, and for all you might be thinking that, I may look at Chris and say, wow, Chris has such a great job. And, he's a speaker, he travels, he designs courses, he's trainer. Maybe I don't like the fact that, he needs to travel so much.
Airports, it sounds glamorous, but it's terrible.
It's terrible, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're taking really early morning flights. Sometimes your flights are getting delayed. Your flight, you're stuck. You're feeling sick. So many things can happen. If I'm someone who doesn't realize that, would just sign up to being good.
Yes. And you'll get ideas because when you ask the doctor about what it's like, and they say, well, this is good and this isn't, it will help you to think about what you want in a job, what you're looking for.
Very interesting.
And you might decide that, really you want to be a nurse or a firefighter or something, because there might be bits of it that you like, but other bits you don't. And so I just think asking people questions is a good way to start, isn't it? About thinking about your ideal job. Definitely. Yes.
Okay. So my last question to you, Chris, is going to be that you spoke about operating at a little lower than 100% so that you allow a little bit of mental bandwidth or,
yes,
headspace, quite literally, for you to do more things. What would be what would look like in practice? What do you think to a person who's, like I said, a technical program manager? What should that look like in practice?
Well, depends what you mean by what would it look like. I mean, I think the way to get, well, first of all, you would know whether you were too busy or not, because what it would look like is that every day you would finish your jobs to-do list. Every day your email inbox would be empty. So you'd feel in control. And obviously you wouldn't finish every project because some projects take a long time.
Right.
But you'd have a plan for what to do as you go along through your project, and you'd know you've done that bit. So you'd know you're on schedule. So you'd know what things you're working on, and you'd know you were keeping up. So you'd feel in control. And in terms of your diary wouldn't be completely full, obviously. You'd have certain things in there and other things would crop up. But during the day, your diary would never reach 100%, or very rarely would reach 100%. There'd always be gaps between things where you could think. So you'd have thinking time almost every day. I think, that's probably what it looked like. But also it would look like you'd have to do certain things to get there. So you'd be quite good at saying no, for example, to things, or negotiating to do parts. So you'd say, well, I've only got an hour for the meeting. Is that all right? Instead of 2 hours, or I'll come to part of the meeting. So you'd see yourself saying no or negotiating a fair bit. And you might be delegating. I mean, it depends on whether you're a manager or whether you've got the ability. But if you've got people who work for you, I think if you're a bad delegator, you're definitely doomed. So I think it would look like quite a lot of delegating. You'd be giving out work to people. And also you would have systems. So you'd be organized. So you'd have, a reasonably tidy desk, a reasonably organized computer. Right. You'd know where things are filed. You'd have some really good spreadsheets that automatically do stuff. You'd probably be using AI quite a bit as well. So that's also what it would look like, because you'd have systems. Everything routine would be systemized, and you'd have very few problems coming up. Because the last time that problem came up, you would have got to the root of it and you'd have fixed it so it didn't come up again. So it'd be quite rare for things to go wrong. You'll always get the odd thing, like when we use Zoom or whatever, our camera misbehaves. You're going to get a few things like that. But you're not going to have, like some people have problems with their computers all the time, So it would look kind of calm and organized with good systems.
Right.
I think that's what is that an answer to that question of what it would look like?
That sounds pretty good to me.
That's the dream, isn't it? I mean, a lot of it's about time management, actually.
Yeah.
Isn't it? In the end.
That I agree.
It's good old time management always coming up. And to see if I've got my book, I can wave around, because my old time management book you can sometimes get on Amazon for 5 pence, 5 rupees that would be. But my new time management book is quite hard to get. Annoyingly, the publishers haven't done a very good job. It is on Amazon. You can find it.
Okay.
But it's quite expensive. So I've upgraded it. But the interesting thing is, I can quickly say, this was written in about 1994, I think. So that's before emails and websites even. Can you imagine? Right. And then this was written this year. And during that time, almost all of the time management problems are still there. Multitasking, procrastination, interruptions. In fact, interruptions have got worse now with phones. Multitasking's got worse. Too much to do and not enough time is still the biggest problem, So it's really interesting. When I updated this, I've had to include a lot of tech in this one, but the tech has not solved the problems. I mean, it's a necessary evil. You have to have it. But all the same problems are still there. So time management is still difficult, and there are still some people who are good at it, and most people are bad at it. So I would urge people to investigate. They don't have to get my book or whatever, but investigate time management for sure, because that's what this is all about, really. Because if you're a bit more efficient on your time management, you can achieve the same amount without having to hustle quite so much. You don't have to run in your hamster wheel in a circular way. If you're better at time management, you can make the same progress with less effort.
Absolutely. And strive for happiness than just achievement. So a combination of achievement,
enjoy and achieve.
Enjoyment.
Enjoy and achieve. That's what success is in the end.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. That was amazing. This conversation was so much fun. Just exploring the different definitions that we've seen. And I'm very, very fascinated by the fact that same topics, 30 years apart, the problems are still the same, and the tech really, we think tech
shocking,
is
isn't it,
solving our
really?
problems, but sometimes tech is only making it worse. So when we don't go to the root of a problem and we're just putting band-aid fixes to things, I think that's also what's happening here. Thank you so much. This was amazing.
I wanted to wave that around.
Oh, thank you so much.
But I also
That
want to
is
mention my
amazing.
podcast, if I could.
Of course. Chris, before we sign off, is there anything you want to share quickly with our audience and tell them?
Well, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. So just go to LinkedIn, put in Chris Croft, follow me on there. Obviously, there are some books to read. I mentioned my time management book. I have also written, where is it? Yeah. So I've written this, which is my big book of happiness, which you can get. You can get it from Amazon. It's got lots of color illustrations and things. It's really, really nice. Obviously, this is worth a read. It's by several people. I can't remember who, but I thought that was a really interesting book and quite different to all the other careers books. Well, there aren't that many careers books, are there? I remember years ago reading What Color is Your Parachute? And that's quite interesting. But this, I don't know, that just takes a whole different view on everything. But the final thing I wanted to mention, if you want to know more about happiness, is I'm doing a happiness podcast with my wife, and it's called Happy-ish. It's that orange one there, Happy-ish.
Yes.
And my wife, who is a bit of a recluse, you don't often see her on videos, and she's quite shy. But the two of us are talking about happiness.
Amazing.
So, and every week we take one aspect of happiness, and it might be, do I work too hard or something like that? And we just talk about it for 20 minutes and explore it and try to come out with what can people do. So yeah, we've been talking about negative emotions. We've been talking about pets and children. Money, does money make you happy? So have a look at Happy-ish. And that would be great if people get a chance to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Chris. This was amazing. And yes, to all our viewers out there, please do look up Chris on LinkedIn, and as well as, subscribe to his podcast, The Happy-ish. I'm also going to go ahead and do that.
Happy-ish.
Thank you for sharing that. So as we wrap this up, just keeping this in mind that it all boils down to getting some headspace so that you are allowing yourself to be creative and you're not on the hamster wheel all the time, which does not allow you to be innovative, come up with new things, come up with new ideas, and finding better ways to make yourself successful. And keeping in mind that it's enjoyment and achievement and accomplishment that makes one successful. So thank you so much for this, Chris. This is Career Uninterrupted. I'm your host, Lochan, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode as well. And thank you once again, Chris, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bye.